Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We thank you so much for being here, whatever time of day it is, where you are. Welcome to The Catch, the NFL podcast, where we give you up-to-date NFL news, NFL debate, and most importantly, fantasy football predictions. So we've got me, John, the leader of the bunch, and Steven, the brainiacs of the bunch on the flip side. We are super excited to be here and we're ready to jump right into this. So we're going to start with a couple hot stories of the week. This segment will probably have more stories of the day as time goes on, but this is episode 1, so we're just going with some hot takes from the week. Steven, super excited over there to see his boy with the flow, Trevor Lawrence, signing his rookie deal. We've got $36.8 million, the 5th year option attached, so $24.1 million guaranteed. One big comment for me on this is just this evolution of rookie quarterback contracts. They're just massive now. And I think, last year, obviously Joe Burrow, year before that, Baker Mayfield. Can you imagine if Peyton Manning got selected number 1 overall, like last year or this year, or Tom Brady? Well, you know what I'm saying? Someone at that caliber, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, obviously it's impossible to predict where quarterbacks what they're going to evolve into, but I mean, it's just nuts. How far the contract signings of number 1 overall pick quarterbacks has gone.
It'll be certainly interesting to see how it shapes up. I mean, every year it seems to be the contracts are getting larger, and that goes from the top down. I mean, you got guys at any single level. Phillip Rivers, you got your Jacoby Brissett's, anybody making the same contracts that superstars 10 years ago could have only dreamed of. More to say about the promising direction of the NFL as a league rather than the talent of quarterbacks that have been coming out recently.
Yeah, and I was trying to do some research. It's kind of hard to pull up. It's just giving me more active rookie quarterback contracts, but let's see here. Rookie quarterback contracts over the years. I don't know who has the was it Matt Stafford?
Yeah, I was going to say Matt Stafford. I believe when he came in, that was going to be the last year before they changed up the rookie contracts deals for their first contract.
Okay.
And they were getting these kind of massive blowout deals for the beginning of it, but then they realized that it was just not really too prudent of the league. But thankfully for the teams, because this contract also speaks larger to the fact that obviously a big number, but you're also seeing a lot of teams realize ever since Carson Wentz was on his rookie deal and led that team to he led them 3/4 of the season through to that Super Bowl run, where you're seeing a lot of these teams start to realize now if they can take advantage of that rookie deal at quarterback, that's kind of a prime positioning of how to make your Super Bowl run, as opposed to bank loading your quarterback and then just kind of being able to piece together a couple pieces that shape up the rest of your roster.
It's Sammy Sleeves, your boy Sam Bradford.
Oh my.
That's who had the largest rookie deal. But I don't know how we forgot about Jamarcus Russell either. He's on there. Matt Stafford's actually number 2. Matt Ryan being number 3. I didn't think about that either. But Jamarcus Russell being number 4.
Can't forget about Jamarcus Russell. Can't forget about Jamarcus Russell.
Legends are born every day, brother.
He is. I mean, he's got to be the biggest bank heist. People have talked about Brock Osweiler, but this guy, he came in there and robbed the whole league, whole organization, and walked away with just 100 more pounds on his belly.
Well, you got to give him credit. Apparently the story is he told his family he wanted to do 2 things in life: become a millionaire and be famous. And to some degree, he accomplished
He
both of
did it.
those. So
He did it. Famous, infamous, not
yeah.
too sure which one, but yeah,
Yeah.
he's going to go down forever.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think we'll get more into the Jaguars a little bit here. But I think the future is bright. I think Trevor Lawrence is a great prospect. I do think it's kind of interesting. You know, last year the whole buzz was Joe Burrow is the best quarterback since Andrew Luck, since Peyton Manning, however you want to swing it. And it seems like no one is talking about that anymore. Now it's Trevor Lawrence is the greatest quarterback since Andrew Luck, since Peyton Manning, however you want to swing it. So I think it's interesting that conversation's been shifted so quickly. No disrespect to Trevor Lawrence, but I just wonder how many more next grades. Yeah, we'll have. But well, I guess that's part of it, right?
They always need I was reading a book of basketball by Bill Simmons earlier today, and I was reading a piece on Michael Jordan, and everyone wants the next greatest to be greater than the one before. Sure. And so that we always need somebody new, and we always want to position people back against each other. But I'm definitely going to dive a little bit into that when we go over the Jags. I think Trevor Lawrence is a really interesting topic. So that'll be up forward later on in the show.
Absolutely. Can't forget about our boy with the flow. So this week we've also got the Dallas Cowboys being announced as the Hard Knocks. What is the official season? A season with blank, Anyways. Yeah. What platform is Hard Knocks even on?
It's HBO. It's on HBO. Correct? Yeah, I think it's on HBO. Yeah, they got a lot of good programs, and I know they've been running out more and more sports things, but this is probably the best thing they've had in terms of their sports programs, and it's a good rival to some of the ones that Netflix pushes out there. What's that one on the college kids and the JUCO kids? I know that's a really big success.
Last Chance U, which is a great show. Chance
U. Yeah, that's what HBO's got in their wheelhouse for sure.
And not to shift gears, but the basketball season they did, I thought was better than the football seasons. But
I heard that.
Great show, and it's Hard Knocks training camp with blank. They always put that in there, and it bothers me for some reason. But 14 seasons of Hard Knocks. The Dallas Cowboys were also featured on All or Nothing a few years back, which is Amazon Prime's version of going through a season as well with the team. But obviously, Dallas Cowboys a very interesting team this year. You could argue a very interesting team last year. Mike McCarthy's entrance as head coach, which this team was on fire last year, first 4 games of the season, no matter how you want to swing it. They looked really, really good under a new offensive coordinator, new head coach, and obviously Dak Prescott's injury kind of ruined everything. Andy Dalton came in there, the Red Rifle, did what he could, kept them a little bit alive and all that, but obviously it's not a contender by the end of the year, although NFC East, everyone's a contender, it seems like. But a lot of really, really interesting storylines. You've always got Jerry Jones there. He keeps it interesting, whatever you want to say about him. Any storylines you were looking forward to personally?
No, I would say that out of the ones you said right there, I think another good one and one to focus on too is just going to be Mike McCarthy. Obviously there's a ton of drama about Aaron Rodgers swirling around right now for other reasons, but it's hard to forget back when Mike McCarthy got kicked out of the organization, and a large part of that was due to Aaron Rodgers and all the trash he was talking about Mike McCarthy and how he would be getting massages in his office where other coaches were kind of doing their jobs. And so it'll be interesting to get an in-person look and see kind of what Mike McCarthy is actually like in the office. Because if they don't shape up to be a good team this year, definitely win the division and do some damage in the playoffs, I think Mike McCarthy and who is the offensive coordinator? I'm losing the tongue right now. Jason Garrett.
That's right.
If both these guys don't come up and they don't make some real damage early on in the playoffs, both those guys are out. And I think it's going to be a real interesting little sub storyline to be
Isn't
watching
it? Jason Garrett would be the ex head coach. Kellen Moore is
well,
the
I think
offensive
he's
coordinator.
that's right. Yeah,
He's with the
New York now.
Giants, New York
Yeah, he's
Giants.
with the
Yeah,
Giants.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it'll be
I
interesting
mean,
to see.
I think that their offense showed a lot of promise last year, and I I still think they have a good little trio there. And I think Dak is a little underrated right now as a quarterback going into this year. They did, obviously lose some offensive linemen. They've got some work to do on the O line, but um, uh, Zeke is still Zeke, whatever you want to say about him. They've got some good receivers. Mari Cooper is still around. I mean, he could play that number one position. And I think they've got, just considering they're in the NFC East, they've got as good as a shot as anyone else does. Let me ask you this question. Do you think being on Hard Knocks is a negative for a team? Do you think it's a positive at all? Do you think that it makes any difference whatsoever?
I think it definitely. I think it does. I think it does make a difference. I think if first off for these rookies, they come in, and I think it definitely can maybe either give them too big of a head, or it can, that's the major thing. I think it kind of messes with the player's psychology. Maybe takes away a little bit of the genuine time of team building, because you have these third party people in there kind of videotaping everything. But I think that you've seen kind of mixed results about how teams have played out. But I don't think we've seen a Super Bowl winner come out of these guys yet out of Hard Knocks. I could be wrong on that, but
I think you're correct.
Yeah, but I will say this. I think it's going to be good, and I'll kind of kick this question back to you too. But I can't think of a more exciting team. I mean, it would be interesting to kind of get Tampa Bay in there with Tom Brady and everything, yeah. Gronkowski, the whole set. But I mean, Cowboys are kind of littered with storylines, America's team, and I think this has got just a recipe for success coming into the season.
So one quick note, the inaugural Hard Knocks team was the Baltimore Ravens in 2001, who did win the Super Bowl that year. Other than that, no Super Bowl winners. And then I think the next closest case would be the Arizona Cardinals. I don't remember what year that was. Hold on.
Is it 2007, 2008?
No, I was going to say Arizona Cardinals on All or Nothing. Let's see, what year was that? 2016. So 2016, All or Nothing, Arizona Cardinals made it to the NFC Championship, where they were demolished by the 15-1 Carolina Panthers, who then lost to the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl by the greatest of all time, Peyton Manning, with only one shoulder to throw with. But to answer, yes, to go back to your question there, if you want my honest opinion, I don't think Hard Knocks makes a difference whatsoever. I think a lot of these guys are used to constantly being shadowed and paraded with cameras, and even if it's not the Hard Knocks crew or any of these other crews doing off-season ventures, they have a paparazzi following them on all bases, and their individual teams are following them at all times. So I feel like for the most part, a lot of players really don't care. They're just going to do their thing. And I do think for specific players, it matters. I think so to some degree, I agree with you. I think rookies, it has a lot of impact on what they can do, how they can prove themselves to their fan base, things like that. Then I think for kind of like diva players, it kind of helps their status, or, you've seen Chad Johnson on like the season with the Dolphins. We saw a little bit of Antonio Brown with the season with the Raiders before he was cut. And I think those players who look for the spotlight, obviously they are more in the spotlight. So they enjoy it probably, but I think at the end of the day, just another camera in front of a football player. But I think there's some positives and probably some negatives, probably some players who really don't enjoy it. And like I said, probably some players who really enjoy it and can probably benefit from it as well. So,
and another major benefit of it, not really to them, but I think you can definitely drive some value from their fantasy impact.
absolutely.
Players kicking ass, you're going to definitely see that fantasy value jump up, even if they're really just kicking ass against their teammates in practice. The second stringers, one guy in particular, I think Dak Prescott, everybody's eagerly anticipating him to come back from his injury. Already got a pretty good value on where he's going pretty early on, but he comes in there, he's looking healthy, he's looking spry. I think you could see him bump up even more. And same with Zeke Elliott. He's already starting to get training camp buzz about being the best in shape he's ever been. So it's going to be interesting. And that's one thing I definitely pay attention to is the fantasy. I get suckered into it as well when they're rocking on the second team guys.
Yeah, I do think that's probably the most interesting aspect of the show is seeing the evolution of some of the so the players trying to make the team essentially towards the end there. And then also seeing, big free agents, small free agents, sometimes getting cut, sometimes getting traded. I really like that aspect of the show. And I don't think we'd get that type of inside look without the show. So that's probably my personal favorite aspect of the show. So we shall see how it unfolds.
Yes, for sure. Yes, for sure.
Hopefully, it's just my personal opinion. Not too much Jerry Jones featured. When they did the All or Nothing season, when Amazon did it, there was so much about Jerry Jones, and I just personally,
he will be
yeah,
all over the camera. That's guaranteed. No getting away from Jerry Jones. I imagine that Yacht will make an appearance. The whole deal.
So, do you want to explain just a brief snippet on? Do you want to explain just a little bit about how we got into this idea for our next topic on selecting a three-piece tandem, where you kind of were inspired, where you got that from?
Yeah, so I think it's a really cool idea. It's not totally an original idea. I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast, and he was speaking with Ryan Russillo. And basically, the theme of their topic was, if you were to take any two guys on a team, the starters, and go down the order of throughout the entire league, how would you rank them? So, for instance, of the last season, you've got, Anthony Davis and LeBron James, you got James Harden and Kevin Durant. So I tried to segue this to the NFL, and basically the best way I could do it was two people isn't going to be enough, right? And then, so let's break it out, maybe quarterback, running back, and then receiver encompassing wide receiver and tight end. So you break that out even a little bit more, just to kind of get a little bit deeper insight to each division. We kind of just go, each person gets two teams that they randomly generated two teams, and we get to kind of dive in and kind of go through the quarterback, running back, and receiver, the best ones that each team has.
So yeah, essentially we're trying to defend a trio for each team in the NFL. We're going division by division. So we're starting the AFC South. Steven is, if you couldn't notice by the color of his jersey, a big Colts fan. So we decided that was a good place to start. Although Steven did end up with the Colts as a random generated team. So I'm going to let you kick off with the Jacksonville Jaguars today.
Yeah, and it's almost unfortunate that I got the Colts because when defending or comparing the two teams, I'm actually a lot more excited about the stars on the Jaguars team. This is much the bright future Jaguars. Really love a lot of the pieces they put together over the past year. Bringing Urban Meyer, I'm a little bit more optimistic about how I think he's going to shape the team. Investing in new facilities, really getting all the leadway he can. Definitely optimistic about the future there, which is not great for the Colts. But kind of diving into this to start off. So, I mean, you got kind of a three-way tandem of Trevor Lawrence, still James Robinson, and DJ Chark. I think that's the best three that they're going to push out of here at quarterback, running back, and receiver. And all three of these guys are lethal weapons. But with that being said, they all bring different pieces to this game. Starting with Trevor Lawrence, definitely a lot of headlines on him. I actually, you said earlier that you thought maybe you getting a little bit more buzz and kind of being thrown into that category of Andrew Luck and John Elway. But I think we're kind of overlooking this guy. I mean, I think it's very feasible that he comes in, he breaks the rookie record for touchdowns. I believe it's a little bit over 30. I think we could see somebody or something in Trevor Lawrence that we haven't seen before, especially with the extended season. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think there's definitely a possibility. And I think as the years keep going on, the rookie passing touchdown record is going to be more achievable and more achievable, just the way quarterbacks are continuing to be developed and continue to progress by the time they're out of college. So I don't disagree with you. I think that's definitely a possibility. I think the another really big aspect of the Jaguars right now is I think they have a pretty good offensive line, which is definitely going to be important to Trevor Lawrence's development. And I think, they're relatively deep at their skill positions. Obviously,
outside of tight end.
Well, I was going to say, I was going to say someone's got to mention Tim Tebow at some point. Is he ever going to make the team? We don't necessarily know. Is he gonna, if he does make the team, is it more of a ticket seller, or is he going to play? If he does play, is it for the fans who are there? But I think they have some pretty good receivers. Obviously, they lost some in the offseason, but I think James Robinson is as good as a running back can be.
As you're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential.
Yeah. And with the James Robinson piece, you saw a guy come in, he's on that rookie contract. The guy, got for bare minimum. And one of the weird things that came out of this draft is they come out and they draft Travis Etienne. And it's like, why did they do this? Kind of no need to do this. You got a guy at running back who very cheap. You're seeing a lot of teams just strategizing to beat them all to hell their first 4 years and then cut them loose without signing them to an extension. So they bring in this Travis Etienne guy. You kind of wonder about the future direction. I actually think this is probably going to end up hurting James Robinson's fantasy value, maybe hurting his value in general with the team. But this is a guy who's probably going to come in here, get a heck of a lot of goal line work, still be a workhorse in this team, 250 carries probably, and just really kind of still be a solid cog in the machine here. But I mean, when comparing it, the Colts definitely can beat out the Jags at running back. Whereas I think that the Colts can definitely beat out the Jaguars at running back, but I definitely think the Jaguars have the edge at quarterback and wide receiver, which kind of leads me to, go ahead.
I was going to say, really, when you look at, I kind of referenced them having some good skill players, but I think DJ Chark is a great receiver.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be interesting to see him not have as much help. But they did pick up Marvin Jones in the offseason, and it's going to be interesting to see who ends up being the number one receiver on the team. But either way, I think those two are going to really benefit one another. And you've got Chenault Jr., who's really was a great playmaker last year. And then they kind of look like a team I would build in Madden. Outside of that, you've got Laquan Treadwell and Philip Dorsett, some speed guys, and even Jamal Agnew, and who's a rookie. Or excuse me, no, he's not. It's his fifth year. I was looking at the wrong slot there. But I think they've got a chance, to really utilize some of these skill players. It'll be interesting to see what Urban Meyer wants to do with them. And they actually have James O'Shaughnessy on their roster at tight end, who has shown some flashes. Not the best tight end by any means, but I think they have, some potential here. So I think it'll definitely be interesting to watch as the season progresses. But I will also mention one last thing on the Jaguars before letting you get into your next topic. What is the problem with Gardner Minshew? Why do you want to replace Gardner Minshew?
I mean, this is what I'll say. If you're going to stack up a apple and Gardner Minshew to a T-bone steak and Trevor Lawrence, then yeah, maybe it makes a little sense. I'm going to go with sexy Trevor Lawrence with the blonde, luscious, flowing hair and sunshine. I mean, this guy's made for Jacksonville. This guy is anything you want.
Can't hate on Gardner Minshew's flow.
I know. Well, hey, he just cut it off. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen a picture recently. Yeah, but this guy did the Justin Herbert and chopped his flow off. Even less defensible with Gardner Minshew. I mean, that was his whole mantra. But, you look at Gardner Minshew, and I was actually really advocating for this prior to the draft. But Gardner Minshew, I mean, would have been a perfect fit for a team like the Patriots or someone like that. I mean, this is an efficient quarterback. This is a guy, it's surprisingly efficient quarterback. The guy did not do bad when stacking up his numbers. The quarterback's kind of like maybe like a Cam Newton or before they got Justin Fields, you could compare him to Andy Dalton. I mean, this is a guy you trade maybe a 6th-round pick for, and you can make him your starter.
I do think, God forbid any injuries, any unfortunate circumstances, but anything does happen to Trevor Lawrence this year, they have a solid backup, and they have CJ Beathard as well on their roster, who has shown that he can step in and play. He did that for the 49ers. So I actually think that this roster, I agree with you. It's really not as bad for a team that only won one game last year. I'll actually mention one last thing. We talked about Last Chance U a little bit at the beginning of this podcast, and Dakota Allen, a linebacker from Last Chance U, is on the Jacksonville Jaguars roster in his 3rd year, which just a fun fact. And I will stop talking.
Carryover. Nice tie in there. Nice tie in there.
I will stop talking about the Jaguars roster now. So
no, we're not done yet because I think this is something. Like I said, I think they have when comparing it with the Colts. I think this is the more talented skill group. We're going to stack up next. We've already talked about Trevor. We talked about James Robinson, briefly touched on the receiving core here. I do think DJ Chark is a player that maybe 1 year ago or 2 years ago, he had a better season. But I think the future is definitely bright for him now that he's got a quarterback that can maybe get a little bit better of a deep ball on it. No shot at Gardner Minshew there, but I think Trevor's going to be able to deliver a better ball. But carrying over to the Colts side here, I do think this is going to be I'm a Colts fan, as stated before. I am not optimistic about next season. At first, I started off, I was really excited about the whole Carson Wentz train. I do think he's going to be a lot better than what we've had in years past. Last Christmas, you sent me a Philip Rivers jersey, which I was going to wear tonight for our inaugural podcast, but I couldn't do it. I hated Philip Rivers with all my heart, and I will not wear a Philip Rivers jersey. With that said, I do think Carson Wentz is a little bit stepping in the right direction, brings a little bit of promise, brings a little bit of potential, and I think him being paired back up with Frank Reich is a great fit in that sense. But Carson Wentz is a guy who I could probably best compare it to as a mental midget. And if this thing gets rough, which we have had injuries in the past, and you got to go through situations where you need great mental capabilities, great leadership to make it to a Super Bowl. And I just don't flat out see Carson Wentz winning a shootout against Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady. And unfortunately, that's what he's got to do. What do you think about Carson Wentz? Obviously, you can talk about Carson Wentz for hours, but just a flat out situation. Do you think this guy's going to cut it?
I think it's important to note that last year you guys were neck and neck for top of the division with the Titans. Both teams finished 11-5, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we've been neck and neck with those guys for a little bit now.
And I think as a Colts fan, you also have to note that you guys really didn't play that bad in the playoffs. And he got as far as he did with Phillip Rivers. So I do not think that Carson Wentz is a step down by any means. I don't know if I want to say that he's a step up, though. So I wouldn't be non-optimistic. I think obviously Carson Wentz is very talented. We've seen what he can do, but I don't disagree that I'm not sure if he has that it factor that some of these other quarterbacks in the AFC have, like a Patrick Mahomes, or even now the NFC is starting to look a little bit stronger overall, and you have a lot more of these dynamic guys coming out. You've got Russell Wilson, you've got Kyler Murray. It's just the league is a little bit different from that.
Not to cut you off here, but Carson Wentz versus Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is better. I mean, he hasn't played one snap.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about who you would rather have for the next 5 years, there's not a second where I hesitate. I'm taking Trevor Lawrence. That's a problem. That's a real problem.
Yeah. Well, I think it's easy to have doubts in your own team as well. And my bigger issue with the Colts, not to jump on your topic of team, would be their wide receivers. But, I think that with the Texans more than likely having a strong decline this year, with the Jaguars needing to figure out who they are, finding their identity as a team, I think you guys have as good of a chance as anyone to be a wild card team. Mm-hmm. And I would attribute that more to the defensive side of the ball. But probably your running game as well. Yeah, I'll see your jersey there. But I do believe that this is a make it or break it year for the Colts as well. I think you guys have to prove something this year. Last year felt like more of a transition year, and for a transition year, it was a great year in my opinion. I think this year, second year under Frank Wright, I think you have to come out swinging. You have to make a statement. And if there's one team in the league over the past years that's made a statement as a new contender in the league, it's the Tennessee Titans, who you're neck and neck with. So I'm not going to count the Colts out. I'm not going to count Carson Wentz out. But I think this is a very important year in terms of what he is going to do as a quarterback and what this team is going to do as quarterback as well. Or excuse me, as a team as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I like how you kind of talk about the rest of the team. I definitely think defense leads the way here, but I think that we have the best running back core in the league, hands down. Maybe the only comparison is the Cleveland Browns with their duo of hell in Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. But you got Jonathan Taylor, who is going to absolutely wreak havoc on the league next year, in my opinion. I love this kid coming out of college, and he started off slow. A lot of people don't remember that a lot of people were trying to get rid of this guy for the first half of the fantasy football season. Then this guy comes out like Superman in the second half. And I think it has less to do with his talent, but more to do with the Colts trusting him more and giving him more and more touches and more responsibilities. Because this guy came from college where he was getting the ball every single play. But you look at this running back committee, it's led by Jonathan Taylor, who clearly has a competitive advantage over James Robinson, in my opinion. Again, I think he's a top 5 back in the league, top 7 maybe. But, he's followed up by a very strong committee as well. And Naheem Hines, who is a very dynamic running back, played great for them, the Colts last year. Not just at third down back, not just as a receiver, but because this guy is so good, it's often misconstrued that this guy's just a receiver. I mean, this guy can play slot. This guy can do anything. But he's been pretty good between the tackles. He's been good at lining up at running back. I mean, this guy really is a problem for defenses. And then you've got somebody who I was so high on last year. I was so depressed when it happened week 1 against the Jaguars, but we're getting Marlon Mack back, and I think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
And Marlon Mack, it's weird because, when you're thinking about him as a fantasy player, it's like do I draft Marlon Mack, and I kind of settled on the fact that no, I wouldn't draft him. But at the end of the day, this is a guy who, is going to be fighting for his next contract. This is probably his time with the Colts after the season. But if he can have a good enough year and then he's let go and he gets re-signed, they're going to get compensated for some sort of compensatory draft pick. So that's something that they've got to definitely, is an incentive for them to give the ball to him. And that's, they don't even need the incentive. The guy's a killer running back. He's been great his whole career. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you want to comment at all on that running back core, but I mean, I'm assuming you're just as excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading an article that came up today. This could be I'm just going to read 2 snippets from this article about Jonathan Taylor very quickly. Jonathan Taylor had 1,169 rushing yards, which led all rookies in 2020. He was one of just 4 players with 1,400 plus scrimmage yards and at least 12 scrimmage touchdowns. The other 3 were Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and Derrick Henry. Also, he made history last year with Hall of Famers Edgerrin James and Marshall Faulk as the only rookies in Colts history with at least 1,000 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. So when you put that in perspective, and also mention the fact that he didn't even play a lot at the beginning of the season, I think there is a lot to be excited about with just Jonathan Taylor alone, if you don't even mention the rest of the running back committee there. I think, like I briefly mentioned earlier, the running game is going to be a huge part of what you guys do next year, what the Colts do next year. And I think it's also going to help Carson Wentz a little bit, being able to lean on that running game. And, he did lose, can't remember his name, which offensive lineman that retired.
Anthony Costanzo.
Yeah, and I think, obviously that's a big loss, but you guys still have a good offensive line. And you don't have to have, in my opinion, a great offensive line to be a successful team or to run the ball successfully. You need at least a good offensive line. I think that the Colts do have a good offensive line. So I think there's a lot to be excited about, especially in the run game. I definitely agree with you there. And not to hop on your topic, I think your tight ends have shown that they can do enough. I think
they're serviceable. They're serviceable.
Sure. I think Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox, they can catch when thrown to, and they can block when needed. And, there's no Zach Ertz, no Travis Kelce around, but they're serviceable. I agree with that. And really the only issue I have with the Colts, once again, is your wide receiver. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, led by Michael Pittman, who I don't give the edge over the Colts. They lost that battle up against the Jaguars too. DJ Chark wins that one, but Michael Pittman, really, all I can say is he's got a lot of potential. The guy can be good. The Colts have had a pretty thorough history at wide receiver over the past decade plus. Kind of stepping from Marvin Harrison to Reggie Wayne to T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. is obviously still with the team, but he's not the same ghost as he used to be. Definitely a different guy now, but I think that was a valuable, signing to keep him there and keep him away from another rival, or, it's going to be a playoff competitor in the Ravens. So that was good to keep him away from him. But Michael Pittman, the guy, was a real beast at USC. I really loved the guy at college. Was very excited to get him, especially where we got him. I think the Colts were really excited about that too, but not sure if he's going to, be outstanding this season, but I think he's going to be good. And I think, again, similar to Jonathan Taylor, this is a guy that really hit his stride in the second half of the season, balled out in the postseason against the Bills. If it was a better pass by Phillip Rivers, that would have been, a touchdown. He would maybe change the entire game.
Yeah.
But this is a guy who I think is going to be great. Hampered by injuries in the first half, similar to our entire receiving core. And another guy, a receiver that I'm really, really just putting all my hope into. I lay awake in bed, just, hoping that this guy's going to work out, is Paris Campbell. This guy is a freak athletically. And if he turns out to be, if he can just stay healthy for a season, I mean, I think this is going to blow the top off this offense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to put that in perspective, you are picking your tandem of the Jacksonville Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, James Robinson, and DJ Chark over your own team, the Indianapolis Colts, whose tandem would be Carson Wentz, Jonathan Taylor, and Michael Pittman.
Correct.
But, hey, I respect it. Hating on your own team. I can't say much because I am a bandwagon
learn to get depressed.
Fan. Yeah. Hey, it's more sweet when you do win, right?
Yeah.
So moving forward, I ended up with the Houston Texans as well as the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, it's an obvious answer between who's the better tandem, but I do think it's worth breaking down the Texans, although we obviously have a huge question mark here. Will Deshaun Watson play this year? Will he play a full season? Will he be facing a suspension, et cetera, et cetera? Will he ever play again for the Houston Texans? Demanded a trade, sexual assault allegations in the offseason. So it's kind of hard to evaluate, right? Because that obviously affects everything. If Deshaun Watson's in the game, obviously he's an extremely gifted quarterback. He's proven you can take a team from the bottom of the barrel, or at least a mediocre team to the top. I mean, think about it. Just the other year, they were up 2-3 touchdowns against the Chiefs and the wild card round of the playoffs. So Deshaun Watson's talented. We all know that, right? But I think to be fair, I have to evaluate this tandem without him. I think it's the only way to do it. So you would assume sure. You would assume that Tyrod Taylor is going to be the starter, right? Mm-hmm. And he has not played more than 13 NFL games since 2017. He was a decent quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. Never won more than 8 games with them. Did have some playoff appearances, but also never threw more than 20 touchdowns. So he's going into his 11th season. So you have to assume he's also had 31 injuries in his lifetime, including a punctured lung in the last season. So, I think Tyrod Taylor is talented. I just don't think his talent was recognized early enough in his career. So that obviously leaves this tandem at a very weak position to start out, quarterback being the most important position of the tandem, right? And then you dive into the running back position as well, which is just all over the place. Is David Johnson going to be your starter? Is Philip Lindsay going to be your starter? In my opinion, those are the two who are going to duke it out. I view Mark Ingram, and also in his 11th year, as more of a goal line running back. I don't personally believe he's going to take too much, barring any injuries, away from Philip Lindsay and David Johnson. And I personally think Philip Lindsay is going to get most of the touches purely because he is the youngest running back out of this group. And I want it to be David Johnson. I like David Johnson a lot. I've been a big fan of him ever since he, kind of took off with the Cardinals. But for some weird reason, I was having those feelings that Philip Lindsay is going to be the leader of this pack. So for this purpose of this exercise, I'm pairing Tyrod Taylor with Philip Lindsay. And then wide receiver, once again, I mean, overall, this team has got to be one of the weakest rosters, if not the weakest roster in the NFL. I'm going to go ahead and put Brandon Cooks as my wide receiver 1. And obviously another player who's had a lot of flashes in his career, has played really well with the Saints, has played really well with the Rams. Well with the Rams, was a good addition to other teams, but as a number 1 receiver, I don't know if there's much of an argument. He's really kind of he takes the top off of defense. He's a speed guy. He excels when he has other receivers who are taking up number 1, number 2 corners, taking safety attention away. So I think him as a number one receiver is relatively weak. And this Texans roster is, like I said, just one of the weakest, if not the weakest in the NFL. So I don't know if you want to make any comments on the Texans before I move on. But
all I gotta say, and you can phrase up all the turmoil of the entire Texans organization with one man, and that being Jack Easterby. And this guy, the pastor that caused so much chaos in the NFL organization. I mean, it's mind blowing, and anything they do doesn't surprise me. They are horribly run. This is going to be a 30 for 30 at some point. It's just a nightmare of an organization. And thankfully, they're in my division so that I can reap 2 wins a season. These guys, though, you talk about a trio.
Just one quick note. Last season, the only win by the worst team in the league was week 1 when the Jacksonville Jaguars, who finished 1-15, beat the Indianapolis Colts. So I would not guarantee 2 wins. But anyways, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, good one. Yeah. I was trying not to think about that loss again. But maybe I shouldn't. Maybe Jeff Driscoll will come out and beat us.
Hey, I actually do have Jeff Driscoll on my notes here because I think it's at a point I was like, is Tyrod Taylor going to get injured? Is he going to be able to play? Is Jeff Driscoll going to step in? So, hey, it could happen. But
my vision for their season plays out like this. Brandon Cooks takes another massive shot like he did in the Super Bowl and is injured week 2. Then they have to step down to Chris Hansen like they had last year at wide receiver. Jeff Driscoll takes over at quarterback after Tyrod Taylor gets hit by the team bus. And, that's what they're stuck with. So, but maybe you get your Phillip Lindsay. Maybe that stays true.
And one interesting connection here is that the Houston Texans did sign Chris Conley, ex-Jacksonville Jaguar, in the offseason, who has played really well for the Jaguars, in my opinion. I don't think he's going to make much of an impact, just given how poor the rest of this roster looks. And one last note on the Texans, and I kind of feel bad doing this, but their defense just atrocious. Definitely going to be a team you want to play your fantasy players against, and definitely a defense that will not be drafted by anyone in fantasy. So that being said, sorry.
You can definitely hit the over in all of these games. They're going to be beat by double digits in every single game. Yeah. I mean, this is going to be this is going to be bad.
Even if Deshaun Watson plays, I don't know if this defense they can't handle some of these other firepower teams in the league without a doubt, including the Tennessee Titans, who, if you do draft any of their players in fantasy, you will definitely want to stream them against the Texans, probably any of their players, right? So I would say for this exercise, on my side of things, obviously the Tennessee Titans are going to be who I favor. You've got Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, my favorite running back in the league, Derrick Henry. And it's kind of hard for this next choice, right? Do you pick AJ Brown or do you pick a future Hall of Famer, Julio Jones? And I think for the sake of argument, I'm going to pick AJ Brown because he has that team chemistry. We know what he can do with Ryan Tannehill. We know what he can do in this offense. And I think the addition of Julio Jones will only open up AJ Brown's ability. I do think that Julio will end up with more touchdowns at the end of the year. I think that AJ Brown, a big part of his skill set is being able to stretch the field. He is a physical receiver. He reminds me a lot of DK Metcalf. I think they're very similar. DK still a tier above him in terms of physical ability, but I think AJ Brown is just super, super talented. I'm a big fan of the way the Titans play football, ground and pound. But I think adding this extra bit of firepower, I think they're going to be, as good as they've ever been. and I'm excited to watch them this year. I think they're the consensus pick for the best team in that division. But obviously, as we pointed out, there's still a lot of talent in this division. I don't even know if we need to talk about the Titans anymore. I mean, do I really need to argue anything? We know what they can do.
I mean, we can kind of go down the road. I think we should spend some time on going down this roster a little bit here. Because
Sure.
you look at the Titans. You know, obviously Derrick Henry, you know, guy's a savage, an animal. I'm going to say that I've been saying this past 3 years, but eventually injuries are going to catch up with the guy. I'm staying away from him in fantasy football. I do feel like the Titans are 1 or 2 injuries away from being a pretty bad football team. People forget about how bad their defense was last year. If they didn't get Julio Jones, this was a very shaky wide receiver core. I think you wanted to talk about Josh Reynolds today.
Yeah.
Let's definitely get to that. But I will say, when stacking up Julio Jones and AJ Brown, who do I like more? I gotta say Julio Jones here. I don't know. I can just see something about AJ Brown. I feel like whenever I had him in fantasy, whenever I'd watch him, he'd get 1 or 2 catches a game, and it would be for like 80 yards or a touchdown. But I could see Julio Jones coming in here, demanding a heavy target share from Ryan Tannehill, and really kind of becoming the go-to guy. I don't know what you think about that, though.
I mean, I don't disagree. I think it could go either way. I think it's really hard to obviously in any way say Julio Jones is not going to be a big factor. So I don't disagree with you. I really, how can you argue against Julio Jones, right?
Yeah.
But I will mention, I think Josh Reynolds is a great pickup. And they actually, they picked him up before picking up Julio Jones. So initially, I don't like Josh Reynolds as a number 2 receiver. But as a number 3, as a slot receiver, I think he can really make a difference on this team. I think that's a great offseason addition. I kept him stashed on my fantasy roster at times last year. And I just think it's a great addition. I will say, I think their tight end position is extremely weak. I wish they had re-signed Johnny Smith. There's some great chemistry there. I think he fit really well in their offense. And I will say that I think their offensive line got worse in the offseason, and they did not address it. A couple rookies in here, I think they have a shot to develop those guys, obviously. But their offensive line got worse over the offseason. There's no denying that. And yeah, I don't think you're wrong that an injury or two could completely derail this team. Absolutely. And I also don't disagree. I think their defense is decent at best. But they just seem to be one of these teams that as long as their defense keeps them in the game, they have a shot. And I think that's kind of their mentality, their style of play, that ground and pound type of football team, where they're really lean on the running game. So I don't disagree with you. I think that they have a very, very good trio, right? And now with the addition of Julio Jones, they've kind of expanded that. But you take 1 or 2 of those guys out, and you've got Deshaun Kaiser and Jeremy McNichols, and their wide receiver core after those 3 already talked about is extremely thin with your tight end position, and offensive line also being extremely thin. So I guess at the end of the day, there's more hope for your Colts. And I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think those are valid points.
This is to close off on this division kind of overview, outside of any other thoughts you have. Before we dive into the fantasy, just wanted to run through a couple of over-unders in terms of the division predictions from DraftKings here. We have the Texans at a whopping 4.5. What are you taking there? I'm taking the under big time.
Yeah, I'll take the under on that too.
Yeah. Jacksonville Jaguars 6.5. I'm actually gonna grab the over on that. I think they could definitely win over 6.5 games. I don't think that really accounts for the seven, like the expanded season.
Yeah, I would take the over, but not by much.
Yeah, it's a nice place. I think 6.5 is
I
actually a
think
really good number.
yeah, I'm leaning more towards 7 games, but I'm not. I want to see more. I want to see this team develop a little bit, and I don't think I'm as committed to the Jaguars as you are.
You're not a bright future Jags guy, huh? Not bright future Jags, huh?
I'm not. I'm not a. I'm not hating on them. I'm just not. I want to see how Urban Meyer does with this team. We've had some big successes. Actually, have we had any big success?
Blake Bortles, big run with them.
Well, no, I was going to say in terms of college coaches going NFL, we typically don't see a lot of.
No,
Jimmy
Johnson.
Yeah, I think if anyone can do it, it'd probably be Urban Meyer. So
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next one. Tennessee Titans at 9. I'm going to actually hit the under.
Really? I'll take the over right there. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take the under because I'm telling you, I hate rooting for injuries, but I think one injury away, these guys suck. So I'm hitting the under. I think if everybody's healthy, all games, Titans win this division by a landslide, but any injuries is a problem. And the Colts at 10, I definitely am hitting the over on that. And I want to reiterate, I'm very down on our skill positions, but this is a team that's going to win by depth. And I think we're going to win 10 games.
Yeah, I think I wish I had looked a little bit deeper into the actual schedules for these teams.
Yeah, I agree.
But I would take the over on the Colts too, and I would attribute that once again to the defense and running game of that team. And just the fact that both the Titans and the Colts last year won 11 games. And I just quickly pulled up the Colts schedule, and I would have to take the over. But yeah.
Do you want to jump over to fantasy before wrapping up here? Just get a couple of quick headlines in there that we wanted to go over.
Sure. So same concept essentially applying here. Steven's going to go over a question for fantasy related for the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Indianapolis Colts, and I will be bringing up a question or two about the Houston Texans and the Tennessee Titans, all fantasy relevant, all completely random. So I'll let you dive into your hot take for apparently your new favorite team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So
yeah, seriously, I sound like a real flip-flopper here. So mine is about Travis Etienne. Really no opinion here in terms of how good of an asset I think he's going to be or how bad of an asset. It's more of a question of what kind of asset is this guy? If it's dynasty, I think this guy you got to draft him. I think the way you would view him in a normal draft as opposed to, or a redraft league as opposed to a dynasty draft, completely different. If we're talking redraft league, this guy is going to bring an interesting value. I think he's going to start off definitely as a third down back, but I don't see a ton of legitimate value with this guy for one season. He's got to for sure compete with James Robinson, who has proved to be healthy, has proved to have been a durable back and very productive, not just productive, but very productive. And then you got Carlos Hyde, who we kind of forget about, gets brought into the mix, but Carlos Hyde always seems to take away from a very sexy, very, very good player. And this guy just comes in. Carlos Hyde, the ugly fantasy guy, comes in and takes away from his carries. And I think it's going to be too hard for Travis Etienne to really carve out a role, especially in the first half of the season. But eventually this guy is going to become the three down back, do it all back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I want a piece of him in Dynasty. I'm giving anything up for this guy.
Yeah, I was wondering if you're going to pick up or bring up Carlos Hyde, so I didn't mention anything. And I completely agree with you on that statement. I think he's definitely someone who will take some touches away from the other guys, but that could also work to their advantage as well, in my opinion, giving them a little bit of a break, letting them, have a veteran kind of help lead them and all of that as well. So Uh, in my opinion, I would draft James Robinson all day, especially late first round, early second round. If he's hanging around, I'm very big on James Robinson. At the end of the day, I think he's going to get a lot of goal line touches. So if you're playing standard settings, I think he's a great option. But I can definitely see you picking your boy Travis in very late rounds. He's definitely a type of player you like to target in fantasy leagues. So I think it'll be interesting to watch as it unfolds, as any running back committee in the NFL is in a fantasy perspective as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to consider here, and I'm just pulling up James Robinson's stats real quickly. He had three, I believe it was 3 receiving touchdowns and 7 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, showing great numbers.
Honestly, pretty good. I mean, I would take that for a rookie running back. I think this guy, he's good. I would definitely. I'm maybe not, first or second round, but this is a guy I'm for sure about. But Travis Etienne, we talk about injuries all the time. If James Robinson goes down with an injury, Travis Etienne is going to grab that role by the horns, and this guy could be a real problem for fantasy football. So definitely late round picks, I would take him.
I also just briefly mentioned, I don't think he played a full season last year.
He did not.
Yeah, so take that in consideration with those stats too. But
yeah, and then real quickly, I'm not going to go. I don't think it even really deserves too much mention because I already talked about it a little bit earlier. But my question for the Colts is, how do you value Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines at running back? And how does that also relate to Jonathan Taylor? So how do you really value this running back core in terms of draft picks? Because I think if I'm taking it, it's just NFL, how are they going to lead the team? That's one thing. But in terms of fantasy, this is a real committee. And I think we got to really keep our eyes open to the fact that it could be a problem drafting any of these running backs with the idea that they are going to be a very consistent back week to week. Jonathan Taylor, I think, ekes it out. I think he's a great value. Not sure if I'd take him with a top 7 pick, but with that said, definitely still a first round talent. I think he's going to finish as an RB1. But then you look into Naheem Hines, you look at Marlon Mack. These guys are going to get a lot of carries, a lot more carries than people think. Naheem Hines is going to get a ton of touches. If I were going to value between the two of them, I'm probably going to take Naheem Hines late in the draft, very back half of the draft. Marlon Mack, I'm probably not touching, to be honest. The one thing about Marlon Mack that does scare me is the particular type of injury he did have. Hits a little close to home. He injured that Achilles. Not all players come back from that the same. And I think that there is the chance that this guy has another injury or has maybe some concerns kind of coming back to full health. But even if he does come back to full health, he's going to be kind of spelling Jonathan Taylor. It's kind of a lot of the whispers you're hearing from camp is that it's going to be less of that third down back, which Naheem Hines has like a very strong foothold in. It's going to be more of, okay, Jonathan Taylor's tired. Let's get Marlon Mack some touches. But hey, guess what? We also have Jordan Wilkins at fourth back, who has been getting very productive work as well. I think he could also take even more time away from these guys. So my real pick on the Colts running back core is I'm not touching any of them unless I absolutely have to take Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think Naheem Hines, my opinion, is a good, if you're playing a deep league, I want to say 12, but honestly, closer to 14 teams in a PPR league, I do think he's a good late round value. I think Marlon Mack is one of those guys you take a chance on late in the round, a very late round pick if you really like to stack your team at the running back and wide receiver position, which a lot of people do in late rounds. I think there's some potential there. And I agree with you. If I need a running back one, there's no one on the board. Second round, early third round, Jonathan Taylor's there. Yeah, I'll take that chance. Especially with some of the things we discussed earlier. But I do think they're not a team I'm targeting in terms of running backs I'm going to draft unless I am desperate. and for all the reasons that you just stated. So
I mean, Jonathan Taylor is ADP 6. I mean,
yeah.
That's too high. That's too high.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If he's floating around, I could see a lot of people in our league that we play in not just passing on him. And if he's floating around towards the end of the first round, if he's still there in the second round, if your dad doesn't draft him, then I would consider it. Just from the volume we saw last year, but I don't disagree with you on this one whatsoever. So talking about stacked teams at running back, we can go ahead and segue into my hot takes for the Houston Texans in terms of fantasy. And at first, I started my question at trying to evaluate, is there any fantasy value on this team at running back? And as I started to dive into that, I went ahead and just threw in wide receiver as well, because for a lot of the reasons that I went over a little bit earlier in our discussion, this is a very difficult team to evaluate in terms of success, but also a very, very difficult team to evaluate in terms of fantasy. And the deeper your league is, the more you have to look at a team like the Texans. And at the end of the day, a number one running back and a number one receiver, regardless of what team they are on, present some type of value, right? Mm-hmm. So, like I stated earlier, Phil Lindsay, David Johnson, Mark Ingram, Rex Burkhead, right? This looks like what the New England Patriots have been for the past 10 years, where you don't want to draft any running backs, with the exception of maybe James White in the deep PPR league. But it's just so hard to evaluate, and I think in standard leagues, some of these guys might be worth a shot, maybe matchup based. Mark Ingram might get some touches in the red zone. And I think it just goes back to who you think the starter is. And like I said, I hope it's David Johnson, but I just had this weird feeling it's going to be Philip Lindsay. But with all that being said, I think for the running backs on the Houston Texans, they're going to be floating around very late in the draft. And kind of like I just mentioned with the Colts, if you like to stack your team at running back, or really just skill position players in late rounds, why would you not take a chance on one of these guys? One of these guys is going to be the starter. And in my opinion, it's between David Johnson and Philip Lindsay. I don't know if you agree with that. But there's...
I agree. I think honestly, I think the real reason Mark Ingram's even there is just for maybe a locker room presence. Outside of that, he doesn't serve a ton of value.
Yeah, I didn't actually. Let's just real quick. I'm gonna look up where they're going in terms of fantasy ratings this year.
Yeah, David Johnson's going at 85, and Brandon Cooks is going at 93.
Okay, so and then just to segue into the wide receivers a little bit. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Randall Cobb's on this team as well. I think I missed him earlier in conversation.
Oh yeah.
And then you've got Chris Conley, and then you've got Brandon Cooks there. They did, select Nico Collins out of Notre Dame round 3 of the draft this past year. And who knows what will happen with that, right? But I think Brandon Cooks has to be the number one on this team. And like you just stated, he's going very late in fantasy. And the deeper your league is, the more you have to consider looking at teams like the Houston Texans, right? So in my opinion, especially if you're playing in a 14-plus league and arguably even a 12-team league, there is fantasy value with the Houston Texans at the skill position, at least running back, wide receiver. I wouldn't go outside of that. And regardless of who the quarterback is, someone has to catch the ball, someone has to get targets, and someone is going to have the ball handed to them. So I think as the offseason progresses, we get more information coming out of training camp. I think it's worth evaluating the squad just like it is worth evaluating any squad. So Definitely be interesting to see how this unfolds. But there's really not much else to say. It's just every time I start to evaluate this roster, it just feels like
they're gross. They're gross. I feel violated by talking about the Texans. I literally feel gross, and I'm mad that I have to actually watch it on my screen.
It's essentially the feeling I'm getting. So, segueing into a less gross team, I kind of struggled with my question for the Tennessee Titans. So I'm gonna go with two questions to cap us off for the evening. First one's just gonna be, I just want to get your opinion, and I think you've already answered this earlier. But would you draft Julio Jones or AJ Brown first?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, so I did say that I actually am leaning a little bit more towards Julio in terms of how I think he's going to be as a player for the Titans. But when you're talking fantasy, I think that also you got to also factor in the value. AJ Brown's going really, really quickly. This is a guy, I think he's ADP right now is 22. Julio, I can check, but I believe is at least 2 or 3 rounds after him. This is kind of a no-brainer for me. I'm taking Julio. I've had AJ Brown in the past. AJ Brown is he's got to do a lot with the limited catches he gets. And before the season, Corey Davis was where Julio is now. They're going to probably put a lot of emphasis on getting the ball with Julio. I think AJ Brown's value actually goes down a little bit. So I'm leaning heavy to Julio, just mostly based off of the value where you can get him.
So I do think it's interesting. In the past 2 seasons, right, AJ Brown has had 132 receptions, okay, and 19 total touchdowns. So 11 touchdowns last year, and what was kind of more of his breakout year, although his rookie season he did have 8 touchdowns. Julio dealt with some injuries, there a lot going on with the Atlanta Falcons last year, right? But on average, Julio Jones has around 150 receptions each year, barring injury years in his rookie season, right? So I kind of was having this feeling before this conversation that Julio would end up with more red zone targets. But the more I think about it after evaluating the stats, I think that Julio is the more valuable PPR receiver, and AJ Brown is your more valuable standard scoring receiver. Julio Jones has only scored 10 touchdowns in one season in his entire career. Every other season has been under 10 touchdowns, but obviously the receivage yards, as well as the receptions, give him a lot of value in PPR leagues. And he's Julio Jones, right? Future Hall of Famer. Unreasonable things on the football field. No disrespect to him. And AJ Brown in his first 2 seasons, season 1, 51 yards over 1,000 yards. Second season, 75 yards over 1,000 yards. So he's just at the tip of the iceberg. I know he has dealt with some injuries.
And I mean, let's not hamper on to Matt Ryan or the Falcons and blame them for all the lack of success Julio's had his entire career in the red zone. At a certain point, it becomes about you. You know what I mean? And this guy just can't seem to get it done in the red zone. And do I think it's all anybody's fault? No, but can we really expect that, this guy at how old is he now? 32 years old is just going to start scoring a bunch of touchdowns? No, I'm not thinking that. I'm not thinking he's going to get 10 plus touchdowns. So that's definitely something to also factor in.
Yeah. And I think if anything, they're going to complement each other. We just don't know at this moment who is going to benefit more from that. So
Derrick Henry.
Yeah, sure. If I'm going to pick anyone on this team in the first round and even the second round, it'd be Derrick Henry. But obviously, he's arguably going to go top 3, so probably not going to be around. But if you're asking me, I don't want to draft either of these guys because, like I just said, we just don't know who's going to benefit more. I think they're both going to have good seasons, barring any injuries, but they're just not players that I'm personally targeting. But with that being said, that segues me into our final question. I kind of cheated. I kind of did 2 questions for both of these teams. But my next question would be, is Ryan Tannehill the most underrated fantasy quarterback going into this season?
Yes. He is.
I think when you look at what he's done with the Tennessee Titans since he's been there, I mean, and don't get me wrong, these aren't out of the world stats or anything, but it just feels like he has such a good chemistry. He does so well in this offense. You're adding Julio Jones. I like the addition of Josh Reynolds. He's going to spread the ball around. He's going to benefit from a strong running game. And you just don't see anyone really talking about him in terms of fantasy ratings, at least from what I've seen. He is the exact type of quarterback that I target in a fantasy draft. So please don't pick him, Steven. But, he's just not exactly flashy by any means. But I think he's going to have a great season. Last season, over 3,800 yards, over 30 touchdowns. The season before, obviously, he didn't play the full season with the Titans. Marcus Mariota started a couple games there. But when he did go in, still over 2,700 yards and over 20 touchdowns. And in my opinion, he was not that bad of a quarterback with the Miami Dolphins, just part of a very bad organization. And don't get me wrong, not a great quarterback by any means, right? But he's always had that potential. And I think last year we saw a lot of that. And I just don't think anyone is talking about him going in the fantasy season. And I'm definitely targeting him. I will put it that way.
Yeah, I think when you look at this guy, especially if you're one of those like you, I mean, I think I focus a little bit more on the quarterback position than you do. But if you follow the strategy, which is a very successful strategy, that to target quarterbacks late, Ryan Tannehill is the model for that. And this guy coming into the season, yeah, he lost Jonnu Smith. Yeah, he's maybe a little bit weak at tight end. I think they still have Ferguson or whatever his name is, but he was productive last year for him. But this is a guy who's going to be able to hand the ball off to Derrick Henry, put defenses in a position where they have got to stack the box, and you're going to throw one-on-one coverage to A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. Ryan Tannehill could have his best season he's ever had. And yeah, Arthur Smith, a very, very creative offensive guru. Let's heap the praise on him. But at the end of the day, this is another coach coming up that I think is going to also, follow the same strategy that Arthur Smith had with the Titans. And I think Tannehill doesn't really do much better or worse. But I think he is still very productive and very good and should be targeted in the late rounds.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. He's still sitting on most projections between ranked at between 10 and 15. And I do think that's appropriate. But, some projections out there have Jalen Hurts in front of him, Tom Brady in front of him, Aaron Rodgers in front of him. We don't know where Aaron Rodgers is going to be. And I just think on that outside looking in tier of quarterbacks in the top 10, I think it's just a really good value, very good target. And I think when you start to look at the quarterbacks ranked under him, the next 5 or so, Matthew Stafford, Joe Burrow, Matt Ryan, your boy Trevor Lawrence, Carson Wentz, your other boy, Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, I think he's a safe bet in comparison to a lot of those quarterbacks just listed. So I think that's my biggest thing with Ryan Tannehill. He's a safe, good value pick. And I think he's super underrated this year. So apparently I'm in love with Ryan Tannehill, so I'll stop talking about him.
I'm in love with Trevor Lawrence. You're in love with Ryan Tannehill.
So if we learn anything tonight,
that we ever man crushes.
Yeah, we'll cap it
you'll
off.
You'll hear more about the man crushes throughout each division overview.
Absolutely. Yeah. So with that being said, we thank you so much for listening, so much for watching. If you joined our inaugural episode of The Catch, anything you want to say in regards to saying goodbye there, Stephen?
No, yeah, just looking forward to, the future of the podcast and kind of how we just kind of learn to grow with it. But, we're starting off with a series of just going through the divisions, kind of going over the tandems like we have, talking about the, some fantasy football burning questions from each team that we get selected, and also going over some fun breaking news in the league. So look forward to doing that over the next few podcasts.
Absolutely. And we will cap off our evening with Steven's beautiful, bold statement there. Thanks again so much for listening or watching, and we will see you next time. This was The Catch.